Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Death of an agreement on the Nile. Israel moves forward with Jerusalem settlement plan. And the CIA chief warns that Iran could have nukes ready by 2012. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
اختتم في العاصمة الإثيوبية أديس أبابا اجتماع دول مبادرة حوض النيل.
In the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa, the Nile Basin Initiative meetings concluded. 5 countries in East Africa said they won't go back on the Entebbe Agreement signed to share the Nile's water. The agreement was rejected by Egypt and Sudan. In response to their position, Sudanese Minister of Irrigation, Gamal Ali Muhammad, said that his country has decided to freeze its membership in the Nile Basin Initiative. As for Egypt's Water Resources Minister, Mohammed Nasruddin Allam, he described the agreement as non-binding.
The struggle over the Nile's water has started to appear between the states of the basin like never before. Statements issued by the ministers of water of the basin states after their meetings in the Ethiopian capital were not as warm as the images from their photo op. Last month, Sudan and Egypt strongly rejected the fact that the 5 upstream countries, Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Kenya, signed the agreement without their neighbors. Sudan and Egypt say that it comes outside the framework of the agreement to share the Nile's water, which has been in place since 1929. Sudan described the initiative of the upstream nations as a breach of the cooperation agreement between the river nations and has decided to freeze its activities in the Nile Basin Initiative.
Until these legal issues are resolved, we will freeze our activities that are related to the Nile Basin Initiative.
Ethiopia was ready to respond to the Sudanese decision and the Egyptian criticism. Ethiopian Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation rejected backing down from the agreement that was signed by the upstream states.
لقد أبدوا مخاوفهم تجاه الاتفاقية وقد سمعت أن السودان
They have raised their concerns over the agreement, and I have heard that Sudan froze its activities under the pretext that it was a violation of the framework and the NBI. We need to make a decision about this issue. Maybe they're entitled to freeze part of the agreement since they are sovereign countries. These countries should express their concerns during our meeting so we can discuss them.
Egypt expressed its fear of any agreement that harms its inherited share of the Nile water due to its heavy reliance on the water from the river.
Egypt is asking the sister countries.
Egypt invites sister basin states to take into consideration that there are 82 million people who have been living in the desert for 7,000 years.
82 million people have started to feel that there are some who want to cut off their main artery of life. The important question is if the basin is truly overwhelmed by its residents' demand, or if there are ulterior motives and foreign influences that are leading these nations to a fabricated struggle.
Canada and India signed a nuclear energy cooperation agreement. Under the terms of the agreement, Canada is to supply India with the nuclear technology and equipment necessary to produce a sustainable source of energy that meets the country's growing demand. India had previously obtained its nuclear technology from Canada to develop its first atomic bomb. Canada is the 8th such country to sign an agreement for civil nuclear cooperation with India since the lift of the nuclear ban that was imposed on New Delhi for nearly 34 years. Meanwhile, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said that he was alarmed by U.S. assertions that Iran may have enough fuel to produce 2 nuclear weapons and that such information must be verified. CIA Director Leon Panetta said that Iran has enough low-enriched uranium to produce 2 atomic bombs in 2 years.
This will have an impact.
A new warning about Iran's nuclear capability was raised. This time, the warning came from the head of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency.
low-enriched uranium right now.
We think they have enough low-enriched uranium right now to produce 2 nuclear weapons. All they need to do is complete enriching it to produce the weapons. We would estimate that if they made that decision, it would probably take 1 year to get there, probably another year to develop the kind of weapons delivery system in order to make that viable.
Panetta's statement spread like wildfire and was immediately reported by the news agencies around the world. From Canada, where President Dmitry Medvedev was attending the G8 and G20 summits, the Russian response also came quickly. According to the Russian Interfax news agency, Medvedev called for verifying the CIA assertion, adding that if such information is reliable, it will escalate the situation with Iran. The U.S. assertion comes weeks after the UN Security Council approved the new round of international sanctions on Tehran. China and Russia, Iran's key allies, voted in favor of the UN resolution calling for additional sanctions on Iran. In response, Iran criticized China and Russia for their positions. The deterioration that Medvedev is referring to may have to do with his country's relations with Tehran. In the end, this means that Washington and its allies were able to add more pressure on Iran. Asad Allah al-Salwi, BBC.
Iran's president says Tehran would respond in kind to any maritime inspections of its ships. Well, our response to practical measures has been reflected in the declaration. We have the right of paying them in the same coins. Experience has shown that we are able to defend our own rights. We didn't want it to get to this stage, but if some people insist, I am sure that they would regret whatever measure they take, even if the one who takes the measure is Mr. Obama, who came to power with the slogan of change. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad made a remark at a news conference in Tehran. Ahmadinejad said Iran is ready to resume talks with a P5+1 group of countries from mid-August, but it called for Brazil and Turkey to attend possible negotiations between Iran and the 5+1. The president further mentioned some of Iran's conditions for the talks. He called on the group's members to clarify their position on Israel's nuclear arsenal. Ahmadinejad further said the 5+1 members must make clear whether they respect the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. Ahmadinejad added that the group's members must state their motives for talks with Iran. Iran says it will continue its peaceful nuclear energy activities in full cooperation with the UN Atomic Agency. Foreign Ministry spokesman Rami Mohammed accused the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency of waging psychological warfare against Tehran. He said the CIA knows the Islamic Republic's nuclear program has no military aims. Mohammed dismissed the CIA director's remarks that Iran could have nuclear weapons prepared and ready to deliver by 2012. Leon Panetta told ABC Network that Iran has manufactured enough low-enriched uranium to build 2 atomic weapons. Mohammed said such remarks are aimed to create a negative perception about Iran's peaceful nuclear activities. Latest data shows casualties of the U.S.-led forces in Afghanistan have been doubled in the first half of 2010 compared to the same period last year. At least 317 troops serving with NATO have been killed so far this year. This month alone, 97 have been slain, making it the deadliest single month for the foreign coalition since the 2001 U.S.-led invasion. NATO officials say the rise in fatalities is due to increased military operations as well as the heavy use of roadside bombs by the Taliban. The rising number of NATO fatalities come amid signs of cracks in the Western military alliance. The mounting death has put the leaders of the U.S. and its allies under mounting public pressure. Now let's go live to Kabul. Our correspondent there, Faiz Khorshid, is standing by. Faiz, why don't you tell us, give us an update on the latest casualties on the part of NATO forces in Afghanistan?
Belarus, NATO, especially American forces, are facing rising casualties now across Afghanistan. The latest that took the overall number of foreign troops killed this year across Afghanistan to 319, compared to 520 for the whole of 2009. And most of these soldiers were killed this month, making June the deadliest month for foreign troops on the ground since the U.S.-led invasion in 2001. And we see that these deaths have greatly affected NATO's mission in Afghanistan. And these deaths continue to remind foreign troops on the ground of the risk they are facing. NATO and U.S. commanders on the ground admit this. They say that the expansion of their military operations have led to the rise of their casualties in this country. They say that their military operations have also weakened the Taliban militants, especially in the southern and eastern parts of this country. But Afghan people, as well as the Afghan government, have a different story. They say that these military operations have further worsened the security situation. These military operations have made the Taliban more aggressive, they say. That's why the leader of Afghanistan, President Hamid Karzai, is speeding up his efforts to reach out to the militants so that he can reach with them and make a deal with them to secure his country. We have received, our sources here in Kabul are telling us that President Hamid Karzai held face-to-face secret talks with the Haqqani network in his presidential palace in Kabul. The leader of the Haqqani network, Sirajuddin Haqqani, is said to have been accompanied to Kabul by the head of Pakistan's army chief. And they said President Hamid Karzai held talks with them, and the leader of Haqqani, Sirajuddin Haqqani, promised to cease fire, to stop attacking foreign troops, especially Afghan forces in Afghanistan.
من جديد تطالعنا إسرائيل بمخططات استيطانية لكن الخطة التي تعتزم لجنة
Israel has once again announced a new settlement plan in Jerusalem. The Jerusalem District Planning and Building Committee is set to approve an unprecedented master plan that calls for the expansion of Jewish neighbourhoods in East Jerusalem, a move largely based on construction on privately owned Palestinian property. The committee's proposal would codify the municipality's planning policy of the entire city. Based on the plan, the municipality of Jerusalem would uniformly apply its zoning codes and construction procedures to the city's eastern and western parts. The committee said that it will give anyone who objects to the plan 60 days to file a grievance.
والمخططات الإسرائيلية لتهويد القدس لا تتوقف فيما مقاومة الفلسطينيين لها لا تهدأ.
Amidst the Israeli Judaification campaign on one side and the Palestinian resistance on the other, more than 50 Palestinians were wounded in a fierce confrontation with the occupation forces in the Silwan neighbourhood in occupied Jerusalem. The Israeli army fired smoke and tear gas at protesters who gathered in Silwan, where Israel is planning to demolish 22 Palestinian homes that it says don't have building permits. Israel is planning to build an archaeological garden dubbed the King's Garden.
من القدس معنا عبر الهاتف مراسلنا محمد السيد.
Joining us by phone is our correspondent Mohammed Al-Sayed from Jerusalem. Mohammed, several media reports have talked about this so-called unprecedented master plan. Was this plan unexpectedly announced, or was it preceded by some measures?
ترتيبات.
لا، هذه الخطة ليست جديدة، هي جديدة قديمة بالمعنى أنها
This is not a new plan. It was an old plan that Israel tried to launch but changed its mind due to international pressure, particularly from the U.S. The plan was first announced when the U.S. Vice President was in the region. The announcement of the plan was delayed again when Mitchell returned to the region. Today, the plan was announced. There appears to be a wide-scale settlement campaign unfolding in occupied Jerusalem, especially in the area of Silwan. Silwan is facing total annihilation in order to build a large biblical area extending east to the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's a major settlement campaign targeting the entire occupied city of Jerusalem.
Was a timetable announced? When will it be launched?
No, they didn't specify a time frame for the launch of this plan. As I said earlier, the plan was delayed numerous times in the past. However, the occupation's mayor of Jerusalem, Mir Barkat, confirmed that his municipality has received bids from companies to start the construction process. However, they have not officially set up a specific time for the start of the construction of these settlement outposts.
Mohammed,
regarding the Silwan confrontations, how did they end? Were there any Palestinian casualties and how many?
نعم كما قلنا منطقة سلوان هي الأكثر تهديدا من قبل البلدية الاحتلال في القدس المحتلة.
As I said earlier, the Silwan neighborhood is being targeted the most by the occupation's municipality of Jerusalem. There appears to be a major Israeli plan to completely wipe out this neighborhood and relocate Arab residents to areas far from the city. Israel intends to expand Jewish geographical and demographical influence in the area that runs parallel to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The objective is to isolate the area from the Arab neighborhoods. The Israeli police continues to regularly hand demolition notices to the Arab residents of the area. Israel is planning to demolish nearly 22 Arab homes in the area. Every time police enter the neighborhood, they clash with Palestinian youth. More than 38 Palestinians have been wounded, and dozens of others have been arrested in the neighborhood. A number of Israeli police officers have been wounded in the clashes as well.
Mohammed Al-Sayed from Jerusalem, thank you very much.
وفي القدس المحتلة بدأ رسميا عمل اللجنة العامة المستقلة التي شكلتها
Also in occupied Jerusalem, the independent panel, which Israel formed in cooperation with the international body, started its investigation into the bloody attack on the Gaza-bound Freedom Flotilla. The occupation authorities have appointed 2 international observers, US Nobel Peace Prize laureate David Trimble and Canadian Justice Ken Watkin, to the commission.
وفي أحدث تداعيات الهجوم على أسطول الحرية أعلنت تركيا.
In the latest development regarding the attack on the Freedom Flotilla, Turkey has closed its airspace to Israeli military planes. This news was confirmed by a Turkish diplomat who declined to comment on whether the ban applies to all military air traffic, confirming that civilian flights are not affected by the measures.
The Lebanese capital, Beirut, witnessed a mass rally demanding that Palestinians be granted civil rights, most notably the right to work and the right to own property. Residents of Palestinian refugee camps from Beirut, the north and the south, participated in the march.
Until we return, we want to live in dignity, is one of the slogans being carried by the participants in the Palestinian March. They are demanding that they be granted civil rights in Lebanon, most important of which are the right to work and the right to own property. Participating in the march were Palestinian residents of refugee camps across Lebanon, from Beirut, the south, and the north. They gathered at meeting points and then set off towards the Lebanese parliament building.
The goal of our march today is to demand the enactment of laws that guarantee our rights as Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. The most important rights are the right to work and the right to own property. We are also asking for the reconstruction of the Nahr al-Barid camp.
Our legal and natural right. 450,000 Palestinians in the camps are forbidden from having access to life's bare necessities. They should be able to live in dignity and freedom in Lebanon.
In accordance with a clear law, I am not allowed to work in Lebanon. Even if I get a Lebanese certificate, they will write on it that I am not allowed to practice this specific profession in Lebanon.
The key symbolizes the right of return to Palestine. Even if there is no longer a door or a house, the key has come to symbolize the return to Palestine.
However, the march was not allowed to approach the parliament building. Instead, it was redirected to the garden of the UN headquarters, where a message was sent to the Lebanese authorities. In it, they confirmed that they are against the naturalization of Palestinians and against linking Palestinian civil and human rights to the right of return.
We want all Lebanese, officials and citizens, to come together and support the Palestinians who are living on this fine land and receiving their human rights, which will allow them to live in dignity.
This Palestinian march was not able to unite everyone in the Palestinian arena, as it was boycotted by both Hamas and Islamic Jihad. In addition, the question of civil rights for Palestinians in Lebanon causes internal political division. Christian parties and movements strongly reject granting the Palestinians their civil rights. Joining them is the Future Movement, which links civil rights to the resolution of the problem of Palestinian weapons in Lebanon.
All of this issue's aspects must be resolved. It must be looked into from the human and civil aspects, but also from the perspective of the weapons and the extension of Lebanese control over all of Lebanon.
The Palestinians are forbidden from working in over 60 professions, and years ago they were denied the right to own property. However, it doesn't seem like the internal Lebanese division over their demands is working to their advantage. Nada Abdel Samad, BBC, Beirut.
The on-again, off-again Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations have only minimized the sources to make a livelihood by the Sea of Gaza. People living here are not getting any fatter. They are suffering from hunger. My colleague Faraz Hatoum reports from the Gaza Sea.
With every wave hitting the shore of Gaza, Abu Mustafa hears a voice calling him. The old captain responds to the voice of his first love. With agility and to the tune of uplifting music, he boards his boat and begins a deep journey.
At first, we were allowed to sail 20 sea miles into the sea. When the problems started, it became 12 sea miles. The situation kept on developing. We had a lot of problems, and it became 10 sea miles. Before the kidnapping of Shalit, it was 9 sea miles, so we could swim and it was fine. After his kidnapping and until now, we're only allowed 3 sea miles.
Within these few miles and the time restrictions that make the trip even shorter, fishermen in Gaza are looking to make a living. They toss their nets into the sea looking for fish that evaded the siege. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail.
Even if we were allowed to fish, we can't catch anything. But since this kind of fish is prohibited, its price is inflated and much more expensive than it would be normally.
What are these 3 sea miles they allow us to swim in? There's so much fishing in this area that there are no more fish left.
From the deep end, the Palestinian Sea looks and sees its ships being confined, either to the shore or very close to it. The sea sends them its waves as a proud salute. Their morale rises again and they start working. Sooner or later the siege will be broken and they should be ready to sail off at any moment. Here, at this spot, only 3 sea miles away from the shore, Abu Mustafa's journey to the sea comes to an end. For years, Israeli warships have been a barrier between Gaza's sea and the fishermen's nets. This is what the period of the siege looks like. The children of Gaza sing for the sea and its sailors that are under siege. Their voices become a scream for freedom that breaks the siege and paints an innocent dream for the establishment of a country.
The Bank for International Settlements said governments must slash budget deficits decisively. BIS also said central banks should not wait too long to raise borrowing costs, as side effects from measures prescribed to tackle the global recession may create the next crisis. Global leaders meeting in Toronto agreed to take different paths for shrinking budget deficits and making banking systems safer. Also, Washington in particular warned against cutting too fast. We get more in this Reuters report.
Following a 2-day summit in Toronto, Canada, leaders of the world's biggest economies agreed on Sunday on a timetable for cutting their deficits and halting the growth of their public debt.
We agreed to balance the need for continued growth in the short term and fiscal sustainability in the medium term. In the United States, I've set a goal of cutting our deficit in half by 2013.
Other G20 countries, however, only agreed on the need for deficit reduction, but not the timing. But one area in which there was consensus among the G20, clamping down on risky bank behavior.
Just as we're on the verge of passing financial reforms in the United States, our European partners have committed to the process we went through in the United States, a new level of transparency and a stress test for banks to rebuild confidence.
President Obama also said on Sunday he believes China is serious on its pledge of greater currency flexibility.
A strong and durable recovery also requires countries not having an undue advantage. So we also discussed the need for currencies that are market-driven. As I told President Hu yesterday, the United States welcomes China's decision to allow its currency to appreciate in response to market forces.
The president said given the enormous budget surplus China has, he expects the yuan will appreciate significantly in the months ahead.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.